Well, Rachel, thanks for coming along today. You're here to talk to us about contentious probate and have you got what it takes to be a contentious probate lawyer? We've done a few of these videos in this series. I just think it's really useful for people to get an insight into your path, how you came to contentious probate and, whether it's a path that they might pursue or something they might specialise into. So just to start us off, can you just give us a bit of a potted history of yourself, how you got to where you are now and say the route that you've taken?
Yeah, sure, Clara. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. I'm Rachel Shaw. I'm a solicitor and partner at Holmes and Hills Solicitors. Started my career back in 1994. I did sort of two different parts to my training, actually, my training contract. I did a year where I was paralegaling at a large city firm doing large scale high court insurance litigation, which formed part of my time counting towards my training contract. Then I did the remainder of my training at a high street legal aid practice in Norfolk. So it was two very contrasting.
Contrasting.
Yeah, but both each as valuable as one another.
Mm.
I qualified in 1996, started off specialising, well, I say specialised, but doing a broad range of litigation back in those days. So some family, some general civil. I've practiced in East Anglia my entire career, apart from that initial spell in London. Throughout my post-qualification career, specialised primarily in personal injury work. And then in 2013, when the Jackson reforms came in, the whole landscape of personal injury cost was transformed, and it really took away the viability for personal injury to really work well on the high street. So at that stage, I went into more general litigation and primarily doing quite a bit of contentious probate work, which then led me to my present position here at Holmes and Hills, where I joined in 2018. My remit was to build the contentious probate offering at Holmes and Hills. I was made an associate in 2020 and a partner in 2023. And we're now a team of a partner and two solicitors and a trainee. And we sort of continue to go from strength to strength.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think with litigation, it's one of those areas where you really can sort of specialize down the line. You can move around and then specialize down the line. Particularly a few years ago, I think perhaps now it's becoming a bit more specialist sort of early on.
I also believe as well, I think during the course of your career, sometimes you have to segue into a different work area as costs change, as trends change, as economic climes change. I think as lawyers, you've always got to be prepared to be a little bit of a chameleon, and perhaps adapt to the circumstances of the time. But it's what
Yeah.
keeps the job interesting, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's great. And what would you say then are the key things if someone's considering going into contentious probate? I mean, it's interesting you say you've got a trainee within your team as well. So if someone's thinking about contentious probate as a direction, what would you say are the things that people want to think about if they're looking at that area of law?
I think I think if you have an interest in people, it's
Mm,
probably a very good work area for you. In my early career, I did a bit of family. I enjoyed family, but it wasn't a work area that I felt I could do on a day-to-day basis. So, contentious probate combines that human element,
mm,
but it's quite a wide range of work. So you've got trust issues, will issues, LPA issues. So it's very, very varied. So I think you've really got to be interested in people. I
mm.
think you've got to have those necessary people skills, and be prepared for the fact that it is a wide, meaty area, but it's certainly a really interesting one. And it's one that I've never regretted pursuing.
Yeah, yeah. I guess as well, because your background, like you said, you were in personal injury. So I suppose it's the same thing there, where really it's the people first and
It,
then their problems is
absolutely.
what comes second, sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to be dealing with bereaved people, people who perhaps feel that they've had the rug pulled from under them because
Mm,
perhaps
mm,
a will's turned out to be very different to what they had expected. Um,
mm,
yeah, and people who have been bereaved,
mm,
really in tragic circumstances and very suddenly, and they're having to pick up the pieces when they're emotionally distressed and also in a place of financial distress as well.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the thing, isn't it? I guess it's a real juggle between, the two, because you've got to be businesslike, but you've got to
Yeah,
appreciate that, that they're in, like you
yeah,
say, often a delicate situation
very much
themselves, sort of
so,
thing.
very
So,
much so.
no, fine. And so what would you say would be sort of the key requirements, good traits that would make a good person, good personality or, good background for a contentious probate lawyer, would you say?
I think empathy is really important.
Hmm.
It's very evidence-based, this area of law. So
Mm,
you're often very much looking at a paper trail, you're examining medical records, which again was something where my personal injury background
yes.
came in. Medical records can play a really big part in cases where testamentary capacity is being questioned.
Mm,
Um, so having that tenacity, I think, and that thoroughness to go through evidence is a really big quality. I think the ability to look at a case from an entire perspective, and the ability to drill down into certain key parts. You've always got to keep an awareness of commercial aspects. This
mm,
area of
mm,
law, the costs, it can be very expensive, and people
mm,
often think, well, there's an estate to pay for. It's not necessarily the case that would follow. And
mm,
people, I think, you cannot underestimate the fact of the stress that this kind of very emotive, kind of quite emotional type of litigation, that stress
mm,
that can play upon a client as well. I've often said to clients, do not underestimate the stress that an 18-month litigious process could take through the
mm,
courts.
mm. Yeah,
And
I'm sure.
that's why I think that mediation is such a key method of ADR
Mm.
in these
Well,
terms.
it's so interesting, isn't it? Because litigation, people think, oh, standing up in court, all this, but it really is the last resort, isn't it? Any
Really is
litigator
last
worth their
resort.
salt is staying away
Yeah,
from that as much as possible because it's
absolutely,
if you want
absolutely.
it sorted before then. And I guess, like you were saying, where people they already have one awful event that's happened to them, being the death of the person involved. So
Mm,
then to put on top of that a litigation, 18 months through the courts or something is a lot for anyone.
very much so, very much so.
Mm,
And that
mm.
I give that advice out a lot actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm sure. But so yeah, and I guess then yes, the key thing then, like you say, it's sort of being empathetic to everybody in the situation, but
yeah,
then quite investigative and quite pulling at all the threads sort of thing, making sure you understand everything that's happened, everything that
very much
is
so,
going on. So sort of
very much
quite,
so.
I can see that would be very interesting in terms of
Yeah.
drilling down into the detail.
I think also the ability to work collaboratively, perhaps with other members in your firm. I'm very fortunate we've got a really large and capable non-contentious private client team. And
Mm-mm,
so we work very collaboratively on cases because often they have an estate where perhaps a discrete part of it might become contentious, and then either myself or a member of my team will
mm,
assist them. Um, if there's any sort of technical queries we might have concerning an estate, then we draw upon their expertise. So it's that
yeah.
ability to work collaboratively, whether it's with other members of your other colleagues or with counsel or with mediators.
Yeah, yeah. No, fair enough, fair enough. And how do you balance? And we touched on that sort of the fact that you've got to be professional, obviously, at all times, but then you've got to understand your clients with that empathy. How do you find that you deal with that? How do you advise others to deal with that delicate balance between the two, really?
I think you've got to remember you're there to provide support, um,
Mm,
to an extent, some emotional support. But at the end of the day, we are not counsellors. We are being
mm,
paid to provide that legal support. So it's a matter
mm,
of providing that legal advice, but in an empathetic manner, and in a sympathetic manner, but focusing on the fact that we are there to provide that legal advice, and that is our remit.
mm, mm. Because I would imagine one might have a client that gets caught up in, going into the ins and outs of the entire family and the backstory and everything, and you've got to
Yeah.
actually pull them back, I expect, to get them on track, to keep them focused on what you're trying to
Yeah,
deal with.
absolutely. And sometimes that sort of dwelling on things can be destructive as well.
Mm,
A great deal of the work I do involves warring siblings, involves blended families, emotions are
mm,
really, really high.
mm,
So those conversations often, or those strained relationships are often a lot of the gravitas behind these disputes. But it is
mm.
just a matter of, dealing with them empathetically. And you're able to signpost them on to perhaps agencies that can assist with that kind
Sure.
of emotional support. But at the end of the day, we are here to provide support. And some of that can be emotional, but the focus really does have to be on that legal support and that legal advice.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, like you say, keeping it professional and keeping them focused, I'd imagine
Yeah,
is the challenge.
yeah.
No, fine. And in terms, obviously, like you said, you spent some of your career in personal injury, and I guess there was a massive development there in the field, which is what actually led you to then move into the contentious probate side of things.
Yeah.
But generally, over the course of your career, what sort of developments have you seen that have had a really big impact just in the way you work or the way clients are, the way firms operate, what do you think are the key things that have sort of shaped the role you have today?
IT, I think the advances in IT,
Right, yeah.
emails, video conferencing, hence we
Yes,
are here
yes.
today, Clara. I think, there's pros and cons. I remember back in the day, we'd be reliant on post. I'd have my post tray and
Mm,
in would plonk a letter, and you'd think, oh, yeah, I've got 7 days to deal with this. With email, it's not quite as easy to manage things, but you get into a routine. I find I structure my day very much around
mm,
first thing I do in the morning is deal with any emails that have come in overnight. I deal with more demanding tasks in the morning and keep on emails during the day. But I'd definitely say use of email,
mm.
increase use of IT efficiencies. Um, back when I first started out, I dictated using tapes. People don't
Right,
even,
yes.
very few people dictate nowadays. I'm one of the few dinosaurs in my
Yeah.
firm who still do. So it's things like that. We used to use fax was very much a
Yes,
thing.
yes,
Thing
absolutely. I same when I started my working life, fax was a
the
big
very
deal.
very thin shiny paper that would come
Yeah,
off the
yeah.
machines. So yeah, technology has
Is
been
there?
a really really big
Sure.
change. Really big
And are
change.
you currently using any interesting pieces of technology? Because obviously there's always talk about AI and all these sorts of things. What do you utilize or what are you
Yeah,
looking at the
we're
moment?
very fortunate here at Homes and Hills because we actually do have a IT projects technician manager. So
Fantastic.
Simon really kind of spearheads all the new initiatives we have within the firm. And at the moment, we are trialing AI,
Mm,
and some of our departments, they've been using it for quite some time, actually, particularly with leases and contract reviews and things like that.
okay.
In terms of sort of work I do, we're trying various things thus far. We've found it very good for research,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
we're just giving things a try out just to see how useful and how reliable it is as well, because you do
Sure.
hear stories about, they're so keen to find solutions that sometimes those solutions might not necessarily be correct, but actually on the whole
Yeah.
we've been very impressed with it so far.
No, that's great. That's great. I think you're right, isn't it? I think everyone's a bit at that stage. It is about trialing it, using it, checking it
Yeah,
works, making sure you can integrate it into what you're doing already, and using it as a tool that it doesn't
yeah,
take over and
absolutely.
become
I think,
everything.
yeah, that client, particularly in this line of work, I think in private client type work, they still want to see a face-to-face solicitor, whether
Sure.
it's like this on a screen
Mm,
or across the table. And I
mm,
don't think that will ever be replaced, particularly when somebody is coming to a solicitor by way of a distress purchase and they need that support
mm.
from
Yeah,
it, that human support. So I think AI, yes, it will assist in terms of efficiencies, in terms of the tools and resources that it can add to the profession.
mm,
But I think nothing can ever replace an actual person. But at least I hope
sure.
want anything to do with it. Well, we're all in trouble.
Absolutely, absolutely. With the people that you see then, would you say, in terms of meeting them, what sort of percentage of people still want to meet in person, and what percentage of people are happy to do things sort of more remotely, maybe online and just through email?
I would say 50-50.
Okay,
And it very much depends upon the demographic is a real key
I'm
driver in
sure.
that. The older generation do like a face-to-face meeting. The younger
Mm,
generation who are perhaps working, and they just find it more convenient to perhaps have a discreet video call like we're having now, or deal with it
mm,
via telephone. But but we're adaptable to all of that, and the fact that video calls have become so easy and were particularly encouraged during lockdown, that's enabled us to have a bit more of a national reach in terms of our client base.
mm. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It does free things up. And I suppose as well, uniquely with you in private client and perhaps even within contentious sort of probate work, your clients really could be anywhere, because if mum and dad die and their will is held with you,
Yes,
children could be
anywhere in the
worldwide,
country.
couldn't they?
Yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely. I had a case recently that involved three siblings, and they were all abroad, all in different countries and different parts of the
right.
world. But I communicated with them very easily with email, and generally about once a month or every 2 months, we would have a Teams call. And
Mm,
so
mm,
we would all congregate on a screen together, and it was really effective. And it
mm,
was it
mm.
was no different than actually them all coming into my office to see me.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I guess that is the joy. Like it is about using the IT, isn't it, to make sure
Yes,
it's, doing what it needs to do,
yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah.
So do you see, in terms of the future then, do you see any key elements where you think there will be advances? Do you think it will just be in the adoption of AI, or anything else that is happening? I mean, obviously there's always things happening in law. I do see sometimes cases going through and that kind of thing. I don't know if there's any big developments on the
Yeah,
horizon or...
I think there's going to be some interesting times ahead. I've already had a couple of cases where frailties in the will writing and execution process has been exposed by the lockdown period. Um,
Okay.
Instances where perhaps wills have been sent out to clients to execute at home. They haven't perhaps realised the significance of having two witnesses simultaneously witness
Mm,
signature. And I've had, a couple of results for clients on that. I think there could be things will come out of the woodwork, I suspect. Things like elderly financial abuse, where
right.
perhaps vulnerable and isolated in lockdown have been taken advantage of.
Mm,
The Law Commission for a while has been looking at the Wills Act 1837, which obviously is a very, very, very early bit of Victorian legislation
yes, yes.
that has very specific rules as to how wills are executed to ensure their validity. The Law Commission has been examining that and couching the views of the public over the past few years, and they're due to produce a report this year, I think
Okay.
quite shortly, that I think will look at e-wills, will look
Mm,
at as to whether if somebody has made notes, as to whether that could potentially constitute something that's binding, um, looking at as to whether marriage should revoke all previous wills, because there is a rise in predatory marriages. So
okay.
somebody
Yes.
could be preyed upon, enter into a marriage, which would thereby revoke the vulnerable person's previous wills, and
Mm,
then under
mm,
rules of intestacy stand to inherit the bulk or a substantial part of
mm,
their estate.
mm.
So measures are being looked at to see as to whether that is something that could be overcome. So I can see there
Mm,
being quite a lot of
yeah.
changes coming up. I
I
think
mean,
also they're going to be looking at the rules governing testamentary capacity, because again, that is governed by a case dated from 1870, and looking to see as to whether
wow.
the testamentary capacity should come more in line with the rules that govern the latest understanding as to diseases involving cognitive impairment.
Yeah, yeah.
So the
The
test that's invoked in the Mental Capacity Act, looking more closely at that to bring it into line.
yeah, that would make so much sense. I mean, goodness, the way the public perceives marriage compared to the 1800s, never mind
Absolutely,
mental health, now compared to the 18,
absolutely.
it's an absolutely different world, isn't it? Never mind the fax
Yeah,
machine. That's
I
probably a
know.
different world. So I mean, to be relying on definitions that are that old,
Yes,
is
yeah.
dangerous, really, isn't it? In the modern world, I
Well,
can see
it's
that.
testament to them that they stood for so long, to be
Oh,
honest.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
but
incredible that they still function in today's world. But
yeah.
yeah, would feel perhaps a little update wouldn't go astray.
Yeah, I think there could be some quite interesting kind coming up in the field of non-contentious and contentious private client work. So
Mm,
yeah, watch this space.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, I know they lifted things, didn't they? They changed things a little bit for COVID as well in terms
Yes,
of your execution of a will and that kind of thing.
yes,
So
yeah,
I guess they did a little test there as well, didn't they? So.
absolutely. Just to see how the land lay with that.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm. Interesting. No, well, that's great. That's really, really useful. And like I say, I think it is just to give people an insight whether you're doing a training contract or
yeah,
whether you're just looking at law or you're thinking that you're a litigator and you're maybe, doing something that isn't fitting the bill maybe and you're wondering about other areas of litigation. I think it's really great to have that insight just to
yeah. It is.
understand a bit more
Yeah,
about what's.
it's a really interesting area, and I don't regret having segued into it at all.
Mm,
I think it's used a lot of transferable skills from my previous specialisms. But yeah, it is very, very interesting. And most days you're seeing something in the press about these sorts of cases that have gone to the High Court. Um,
definitely.
so it you do see a lot of it, and I think it's only going to be on the increase.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's for all those reasons you've said, isn't it? It's the blended families, it's the complexity of relationships.
Yeah,
Generations now merge in different ways, don't they? You can have an uncle that's the same age or same generation as their nephew and all this kind of thing. It's very common. So it's like
yeah,
we say, a long way from the 1800s version of a family in succession.
yeah.
So
I think, and estates are getting bigger because property prices have risen.
sure.
And then people are relying on their perceived right to inherit to be able to afford their own properties.
Mm.
So there's all those factors that, mixed all together has produced this boom.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's fascinating. Fascinating. Well, thank you so much for just coming
So
on and spending a bit of time talking about it.
it's been an absolute
Um,
pleasure.
oh, no problem, no problem. Lovely to speak to you, and I'm sure it will help lots of people along the way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Clara.